I was born as a sighted child, and both of my retinas detached when I was in kindergarten. I had an emergency surgery. I came blind, totally blind very quickly. For first, second, and third grade, I started using technology immediately. I have an impairment, a visual impairment. I can't see. That doesn't mean I'm always in a disabling situation. If I have the access to the built digital or social environments that I need, then although I have an impairment, I'm not disabled at that point in time. Technology allows us to customize the fit with the world.
All right, welcome. I'm here with Dr. Kirk Adams. And Dr. Adams, really a pleasure to have you on the show. And then additionally, the first question I have for you is what got you interested in the intersection of humanity and technology?
Oh, well, I became very, very interested very early on. I was born as a sighted child, and both of my retinas detached when I was in kindergarten. I was a kindergarten kid playing on the playground, got on the bus to go home. A little bit of snow had fallen, and I could not distinguish my environment. My mom found me crying in the neighbor's backyard and rushed me to the doctor, and my retinas had detached. I had an emergency surgery. I came blind, totally blind very quickly. And I at that point in time, in the mid late 60s, kids with disabilities were not typically educated in their local public school, but went to specialized residential schools. So I attended the Oregon State School for the Blind for first, second, and third grade, and learned. I started using technology immediately. Some simple technologies: a slate and stylus to write Braille with, a Perkins Braille writer to write Braille with. I learned how to type on a manual typewriter so that I could type my assignments for teachers. I was introduced to my first uh, electronic mechanical reading system. It was called the Opticon. This was probably 1968. You put your two index fingers on little pads, and there were little electronic pins that would vibrate, and it replicated print. So there was a camera that would scan a print document, and then you'd feel the pins vibrate in the form of print. Some blind people still love the Opticon. It's not made anymore. There's a brisk aftermarket on eBay for Opticon parts. some some people learned it and love it. I was introduced to about the same time as a 7 or 8 year old, so before 1970, to a Sonar-Type device. I remember it was about as large as a pretty big flashlight, and you would hold it in front of you. I remember practicing with it in the auditorium. It would give you different tones depending on how far away an object was, so you could distinguish, where a auditorium seat was, where the space, the aisles were, etc. So very, very early on, using technology and people with disabilities as we use our creativity to create a better fit between ourselves and the environment. Technology is so important to us. As I have an impairment, a visual impairment, I can't see. Um, that doesn't mean I'm always in a disabling situation. If I have the access to the built digital or social environments that I need, then although I have an impairment, I'm not disabled at that point in time. And I use a really simple example. If I'm running a board meeting, which I've done many times, and I have my agenda in Braille and my committee reports and my financials, I can run that meeting as effectively as a sighted person can. So my impairment does not put me in a disabling situation. If you bring me a stack of print materials, I cannot run the meeting because my impairment does not allow me to interact with that environmental element of print. So
Yeah.
technology allows us to customize the fit with the world in amazing ways, and that the capabilities to customize our fit with the world has accelerated uh, exponentially. I will use that word over the last 30 years. I'm not a super techie person, but I use technology all the time, as most of us
And
do.
it's
as most of
It's
us do
fascinating.
in our society, but I use it a little
Yeah, yeah.
differently.
Well, no, and I think that there's like an amazing opportunity that you're talking about here of, you're first introduced to that. I can't remember the name of the
The
device that was like a
Opticon.
flashlight, the
Oh,
Opticon.
yeah.
Oh
The other
no,
one was called the Mini Guide, I think. The
the mini
sonar.
guide, right?
Yeah.
But that's a sonar kind of like play, and then seeing how the neuroplasticity of the mind allows you basically to work with your environment based on the tones that it was giving, and then
Right.
the Opticon is a similar sort of aspect to it of like how you're using the heightened ability of other senses now
Yeah.
to interact with an environment. I'm sure that be having to, fit to your environment in different
Yeah.
ways than somebody
Yeah.
else
Well,
does
I
leads
read
to other
Braille.
opportunities.
I
Yeah.
learned Braille as a 6-year-old. I have a Braille display sitting in front of me with my PC. I have a Braille tablet. I have Braille books all over the place, and people say it's so amazing that you can learn to read Braille. And I say, well, it's so amazing you could read print. It's symbols that represent
Yeah.
words, and so you apprehend it with sight, your symbol system. I apprehend my symbol system through touch. It's still converting something symbolic into meaning through language, a written language.
Where has, like you said, we're in an exponential growth space as far as what technology is doing for those who are, in your situation as well. Um, how do you see this coming about in like the coming years?
Yeah. Um, well, there's benefits and then there's risks. So, benefits um, that are happening now is ease of functions, ease of activities. As people with disabilities, we're used to having to do extra things, extra steps, converting things into accessible formats, using extra tools, running into accessibility issues, websites that aren't designed properly to interact with our screen reading software. So, artificial intelligence in particular holds out a lot of promise for cutting through a lot of that. Transportation is very exciting. The thought of autonomous vehicles got has a lot of excitement in the blindness community. The fact that transportation always features in research as prominent barriers to inclusion of people with disabilities in all aspects of society. So, independent transportation is super exciting. The use of technology for wayfinding. I use the long white cane. I have since I was 6. I've traveled in many large cities and airports and hotels independently. Um, Sometimes very challenging learning to use the New York subway system when we moved to New York in 2016. Super challenging, but to have agentic AI that can assist you with that and
Yeah.
can know where you are and map the environment and give you instructions. Um, Super exciting. Right now, the big rage is image description, and for me, I've been blind for 58 years, 57 years. I cannot create a I cannot create a visual image anymore. So image description is not a big deal to me,
Okay.
but for people who have been sighted and have become blind as through accident or illness or degenerative eye conditions, and they can still create visual images, the image description is just so exciting for people. And Meta has Ray-Ban glasses that have image description built in. Microsoft has a free app they developed that's now open source. You can download on your smartphone that does image description. That's super exciting. And I mentioned agentic AI, and I think that's the next big leap forward for people with all types of disabilities is to have, we rely on personal assistance a lot. I mean, when I was in college and I could not get my textbooks in Braille, which I mostly couldn't, and if I could not get them on cassette tape from Recording for the Blind, a nonprofit, I paid my fellow students to read to me. Um, People have personal assistants who read their mail. Um, so there's a nice thought around being more autonomous, more able to get those types of supports through agentic AI on demand, and to have privacy. If you have a reader helping you pay your bills and fill out your medical forms, there are privacy issues there. So there's a lot of excitement in the disability communities about technology and where it's going, and there's also a lot of concern about bias in the systems, and we can talk about that.
I'm definitely interested in jumping into the bias, but I want to come into some of the positives that you're talking
Yeah.
about here. Um, Agentic AI is something that's very passionate for myself and for our business as well.
Uh huh.
And so one of the things that you're talking about as far as like privacy and confidentiality when it comes to these systems is incredibly important, both
Yes.
for, I think, individuals, but also for businesses to have an understanding of. And so what are the things that you're looking for in solutions uh, that are handling these privacy and confidentiality concerns?
I'm going to ask you that question because although people there's a sense of freedom to work with technology to do things like pay your bills and fill out your medical forms and read your prescriptions and things like that, not having another human being to it do it, a friend or family member. If you
Yeah.
if you can do if you don't have the impairment of vision and you can do that stuff yourself, you're not put in those positions to have to make choices about who do you choose to trust. Um, the feelings of discomfort to have people exposed to your private information. So I think there's a great hope that agentic AI can remove some of that. There's also a great fear. What happens to that data? This machine is doing something. This data is
Oh,
going somewhere. How is privacy protected? And I'm not sophisticated enough to offer solutions to that, but
okay.
hoping you are.
Well, and I can give you the kind of rubric that I use is, looking at AI is more like a person in the room, right? Do I trust
Yeah,
this person and are their intentions aligned with what I'm doing?
yeah,
And then specifically, like we look at like what social media was doing in the mid 2010s, right? Like the news feeds were using and are still using AI to show you stuff,
right.
but what they wanted was your attention. And so they didn't care how they got your attention, which meant
Mm-hmm.
that the algorithm was actually like, if I can elicit fear, I can elicit anger. They are very primal
Yep, yep.
emotions that will end up driving you to continue using these pieces of software. And so, we see the epidemics of mental health corresponding to the rise of social media and then the separation of people from each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we look at like agentic AI, we got to look at it from the same lens of, is this system aligned with me or is
Mm-hmm.
it aligned against me? And from a company perspective, the way that we look at this is if you have an AI that is, I, let's just say Salesforce, Microsoft,
Yeah,
it is aligned with their corporate interest. And so
sure.
treat it like you do for a consultant in your business. Know the information that you give to it. But then additionally, we need to look at like, how do you bring AI into your business as an employee?
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to make sure that your data is, living in your own environments, or you have the legal protections of privacy agreements and that your data isn't being used for training. And then
Right.
additionally, you have the ability to set the intention for that AI. And so with agentic, that's you set the goal and it
Mm-hmm.
is basing its success upon whether it meets your goal or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a good jump into the
I'm
the
taking
fear
notes.
side of this.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a
Well,
good thing we're recording this as well.
yeah. So this morning I put a question into an AI tool that I use that I pay for that has developed a corpus of, I started out, I put my dissertation in there and everything I'd ever written in articles. So, it's got some hundreds of pages of stuff I've written, and then whenever I create a document, it gets added to the corpus. And I asked it, what are some good jobs or careers for people who are blind? And it gave me a beautiful long list. by industry and profession and kind of school of thought, and it was very complete and lovely. And then I popped it into just a free thing I have access to and asked it the same question, and it said it was a much shorter answer, and it said the and I'm paraphrasing. The top three best careers for people who are blind are assistive technology specialist, massage therapist, or musician. So, those are very stereotypical career pathways for people who are blind historically.
Okay.
And in my layperson's understanding, the large language models, the AI tools are based on data sets, and people with disabilities use technology less than people without disabilities. There's very solid research that shows we use technology less hours per day, less functions. Starts in Now it starts in early childhood, and 2 or 3 year old sighted kids are playing on the iPad.
Yep.
But the so our lived experience is underrepresented in the data that undergirds these AI tools. So there's a question about what to do about that. There is an app called Be My Eyes that was started about 10 years ago, and it connects a blind or visually impaired person with a volunteer to get visual information. So if I have an app on my phone and I'm in my hotel room and I can't figure out which arrow moves the temperature up or down, I can click on Be My Eye and a volunteer will come on. I can show them the thermostat with my camera. Ask them, which of these makes the temperature go up. They can tell me, assist me with that task. They created a tool called Be My AI, which can read text and do image description and things like that. And they have a partnership with Microsoft, and they're not anonymizing. They're making the information anonymous, but they're passing the data of the Be My AI use onto Microsoft, and they're
Okay.
they're attempting to build a data set specifically around use functions of visual information for people who are blind. So that's one effort I know that's going on. But my great interest is to understand how something systemic can be done. Um, and my particular lens is people with disabilities and people who are blind in particular. But my interest is in that AI is useful to improve the lives of everybody and assist us in our journey of thriving as human beings. And how do we do that for the most people?
I keep on coming back to it. Another initiative that I've been in that's not specific to anybody with disabilities, but definitely to underrepresented populations of people.
Uh huh.
Specifically, like, there's, I think we're speaking 7,000 languages right now
Mm-hmm.
around the world, and that there's a couple, at least dozens of them to 100 or 200 a year that end up going out of existence.
Right.
And so there's a blockchain initiative to capture the language so
Mm-hmm.
that in the future it's not lost. And like we're specifically working with like tribes of the Amazon
Mm-hmm.
to bring their language and their culture into the tech world so that it is represented in the data sets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that,
Cool.
I'm hopeful that there's also some for the visually sighted as well, or visually impaired to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
be participating in that type of approach. And it seems that there is with the Be My AI at least leading the charge on that.
Yeah, that's the most organized effort I'm aware of.
Where do you see, terribly phrased question. Um,
No, that's fine. That's the
okay,
vernacular. I say
yeah.
I say I watched a movie. I'm watching the game. See you later.
See,
It's all
it's
fine.
always amazing when you come into the vernacular, and like I've done a lot of business overseas,
Uh-huh.
and the number of times that I'll get caught talking in colloquialisms
Uh-huh.
that just don't translate at all.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, so where do you end up seeing the kind of that ideal place, or what are the hurdles that we have to overcome in order for the visually impaired to be included in the next wave of technology that we're embarking on?
Well, that is a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
Speaking of vernacular, so attitudes run so deep. People's misperceptions, misconceptions of people with disabilities, our capabilities. There's kind of myths of the superhero or the super dependent person with a disability. Um, Lack of exposure. I mean, I focus on employment for people with disabilities. That's what I spend my time trying to address because only 30 in the U.S. only 35% of us with significant disabilities are in the workforce, compared to 70% of the general population. And our jobs are narrower range of types of jobs, largely confined to the kind of bottom rungs of the org chart. So there's a lot of poverty, etc. And a lot of it has to do with employer attitudes and misperceptions and lack of understanding of the tools and techniques that we use. And even more than that, the fact that the way people develop talents is through overcoming challenges. Some of that is structured. If you become a chess champion or a champion athlete or a concert musician, you're in a structured system of facing greater, more complex challenges. For us as people with disabilities, it kind of happens naturally as we try to move through the developmental stages of life, school, relationships, work, education. Our challenges become more and more complex. But we do develop some really unique strengths around resilience and creative problem solving, and grit and perseverance, and analyzing and managing risk and those things. So somewhere vaguely in the back of my mind is how can technology be used to bring those um, realities into the space of changing understanding perceptions and attitudes. And I'm not quite sure how that works. If um, I'm involved with a program that I helped develop called the Apex program, and it prepares blind people for entry level jobs in cybersecurity to get Network Plus and Security Plus certifications.
Nice.
And most of the tools used in cyber are pretty accessible, and for the right blind person, it's a great career path. And then when we begin talking to employers, you really have to start at such an elemental level, as most of them have never seen a blind person using a computer, aren't familiar with screen reading software, aren't familiar with the tools that are out there. And the most effective tool I have is to take them to see it happening. Like take an employer in Chicago into the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind, bring a Seattle employer into the Seattle Lighthouse for the Blind, where there are dozens and dozens of blind people doing knowledge-based work using computers and assistive technology. So it's a pretty laborious process to take people to create this exposure employer by employer. So somewhere in the back of my mind is can I use AI and virtual reality? Can I create these experiences and import them to the employer somehow? So I just think the age old problems around emotion, attitude, that's the human side of this, and how can we use these tools to accelerate the change in those dynamics.
I'm actually looking forward to that as well. I think a lot of our own perception of the world is trapped in our own kind of like experience and what we have. And so seeing things a bit differently can help us work out those mental models.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to AI kind of like being that balancing point because there's only so much time that you can spend with your therapist, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you actually have to be out in the real world, where you're experiencing your own limitations, where you're experiencing
Yeah.
you know, your own thoughts that kind of lead you into your limitations or like your perception of something
Yeah.
that may not be true. And having AI is that counterpoint that could,
Right.
quickly point out like, hey, you're not looking at this from the perspective. But also, as I'm sitting here thinking, you know, the ability for you to handle abstract thoughts and the kind of concepts is probably far, not far beyond, but you probably have a different way of looking at the perceiving the world than somebody else that
Yeah,
has
that's
kind
right.
of fit into the environment.
Right.
And so I'd imagine that's a great selling point for
That's
employers,
right.
especially
It,
in cybersecurity.
right. So it's innovation, it's perception, it's abstract thinking, which you have to be able to do in order to survive, not only thrive but survive as a person, with an impairment in this world that was for good reason designed and built for and by people without impairments.
What's one thing, maybe even two things that you would recommend to people to finding new ways to be working with people with impairments, or like what's the first step that we need to make as employers and people of this world to make a more inclusive space?
Yeah, I'm doing quite a bit of work. I'm an advisor to a big market research company called Ipsos, based in France, and they have a user research division built in Chicago, and I'm helping them because they authentically want to include the perspectives of people with lived experience of disability in their market and user research for products and services. And I just said, well, just engage. So I did a training for some of their leaders recently, and I said, let's just take 5 minutes and think about an impairment. And we had the conversation about impairment versus disability. And I said, think about an impairment that means something to you. Do you have a relative who has hearing loss? Do you have a parent with Alzheimer's? Did you have a college roommate who had a visual impairment? Did you used to ride the bus with someone who used a wheelchair? Just something that resonates with you. And then let's take a few minutes and put some terms into a search engine. So let's put the name of where you live. Let's put the name of that impairment, and then let's put a word like association or organization or advocacy, and you will find groups of people who have passion and energy around that impairment and making the world a more inclusive place for people who have that impairment. And I said, at very least, go to their website, sign up for their newsletter. If they have a meeting, go to it. Go if you call up an organization like that has a physical location and say, I'm super interested in making the world more inclusive for people who use wheelchairs. Could I come in and take a tour? They, they will 110% welcome you to come in and learn more. So that's my advice: is connect and engage and join community.
I can definitely agree with you, my friend. There is something incredibly powerful about being locally engaged with people that are, you know, fitting what you're passionate about as well.
Yep. So that's what I recommend people do who want to. And if that one doesn't fit for you, there are others out there. And there's such a wide range of human experience and human characteristics that wherever you choose to start intersecting with some new dynamics will be good for everybody.
Well, Dr. Adams, where can people get a hold of you in case they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, my website is just www.drkirkadams.com, drkirkadams.com. I have a
Nice.
I have a newsletter. I'm very very active on LinkedIn, so it's Kirk Adams PhD on LinkedIn. And my dissertation work was an ethnographic study of blind adults employed in large American corporations. So I interviewed quite a number of blind people employed at a lot of brand name companies in the U.S. And I learned a lot about the factors that led to their success, the barriers they had to overcome, and the ever-present disappointment that we haven't moved farther faster.
I mean, I share that in everything as well. So, um, Dr. Kirk, it's been an absolute pleasure having you
Yeah,
on the
it's
show,
great.
and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about what you're doing sometime. So I'd like to get on another call just to hear about your work.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.